Recently in the One Piece community, there has been this big, disgusting, enveloping drama about the difference between a swordsman and someone who merely uses a sword with haki infused within it. And it's been destroying a lot of people's usual conflict analysis in their brain. It's been messing up how they view things. And I want to talk about this because I'm discovering that One Piece has what I call a majority issue, where a lot of people like One Piece, same way a lot of people enjoy solo leveling. And people like solo leveling because it was basically aura farming. And when he starts showing emotions and character complexity, they hated it. With One Piece, so many people like One Piece that the average person is not going to understand any nuance in discussing a topic such as swordsman and someone who uses a sword, which are two different things. But to me, personally, it doesn't matter because they're both swordsmen to everybody else. So I'm telling you this right now, despite me knowing the difference, the average person will never understand the difference, and that is important. So, if you don't know the drama, everybody's going after Brago D Ace and saying, well, look at this. This is also One Piece spoilers, by the way, if you don't want to be spoiled about the manga, so you can click off, but I'm just going to explain a little bit what's going on. I'm not going to use any names. A certain character used a sword. And he was using a sword imbued with his own willpower and spirit, and he sliced somebody when it has been shown they said he wasn't actually a swordsman. And the current One Piece drama is over who counts as a swordsman versus someone who merely is using a sword. Feels like watching people debate over whether a guy holding a sandwich is technically a chef. That's what I feel like it is. The rest of us are just trying to eat lunch. That's what we're doing. It's this obsessive semantic hair splitting that only happens in fandoms that have grown so massive that they begin eating their own shadow. So you know what Oda's probably doing? Laughing. Because Oda will write a man with a sword imbued with his spirit and his soul, and people are arguing about the vocabulary of what it means. And that's what I love about this community so much, is the fact that we can actually have arguments about such specific things. The main difference people cling on to is that a swordsman supposedly dedicates themselves entirely to the blade as an art and a lifestyle. We got that? Good. Whereas someone using a sword just happens to wield it as a tool or a weapon. In other words, a swordsman is defined by discipline and philosophy. A sword user just swings his swordsmanship. But here's the problem. The distinction only exists in conversation, not in reality, to be quite honest with you. I don't think anybody in the One Piece world stops to clarify, oh, excuse me, I'm not a swordsman, just a guy with a sword. They fight, they bleed, they win or lose. The semantics belongs to the fans, not the pirates. Now, you could argue that when Mihawk was testing his distance between the world's strongest man and Whitebeard, you could argue that, okay, he's the world's strongest swordsman, but he's not the world's strongest man, because Whitebeard uses his fist. He fights with his fist. And a swordsman specifically dedicates his whole life to just honing his power with the sword. How strong is somebody that has tossed away the lifestyle of the sword versus somebody that's the strongest man? You could argue that. You could do that. And there may be some characters in One Piece that do that. But I don't think they care. I don't. It's, for instance, Zoro could get the strongest title of the world's strongest swordsman, right? He could get that title, right? And everybody would say, yeah, but there's got to be another world's strongest man. There's got to be another world's strongest creature, because there's always different titles for how it works. World's strongest creature, how come it doesn't include world's strongest man? That doesn't make any sense. Well, Kaido is technically a swordsman because a Kanabo is a kind of a sword. Technically, he's using a weapon. Wouldn't that count? That's strange. And the irony is that the fandom built this line to glorify certain characters and gatekeep others. It's the equivalent, it's the weapon equivalent of arguing about whether a guitarist is a musician or a guy strumming for rent. Sure, Zoro calls himself a swordsman because that's his identity, but does that mean Big Mom, who wields Napoleon with the sheer force of a demigod, isn't a swordsman? Or that Mihawk title loses weight if he ever cuts someone with something else? The logic collapses under its own elitism. The whole logic just folds in on itself from just literal semantics in the story based on the words used in it. So this is swordsmen who dedicate their life, right? And then there's Big Mom who comes in using Napoleon. Is Napoleon technically a sword or is it an infused weapon? And it gets really specific. In the short term, this debate is fun. I think it's fun. I do. I love it. It sparks passion. Every time I see someone wield a sword, I say, that's a Mihawk upscale. That's Mihawk upscale. It's great. That's a Chopper upscale, actually, when you think about it, because Chopper can heal cuts. So Big Anthony Helicopter, Big Ant. That's a Big Ant upscale. That's crazy. So I love doing that. It's fun. It reminds people how invested they are and shows that One Piece has a level of mythic detail where even word choice feels sacred. Okay, so I'm using armament hockey, which is different than conquerors, which is different than this, which is different than color of arms, which is it's very this is real. This is a different level of armament. This is a different level. The best part about fandom is caring too much about nonsense. It's how community thrives. People feel smart, sane, and connected when they dissect Oda's words. He probably wrote at 3 a.m. that he probably didn't even care about, but hey, that's how it is, and it's fun. And I'm usually in debate servers, and people are tearing me apart. I just got done talking to somebody, and they said, well, Kizaru wasn't mentally nerfed. I said, yeah, he was obviously conflicted. It wasn't at 100% power on Egghead. That's what I think. And they said, well, Sanji's always conflicted. So Sanji's not on 100% power. Tell me who you think is stronger, Zoro or Sanji? Zoro? No, well, actually, we do never see Sanji at 100% power, so how can you definitively say that? And that was so fun, because it's so stupid. It's such a stupid thing to say, and I love it. And everybody else was saying, oh, this guy's getting cooked. And I was getting cooked, because I wasn't stupid enough to talk about this. I was not dumb enough to remember every specific instance of every discrepancy. I was not stupid enough. Well, you gotta admit that Sanji and Zoro are comparable, at least. I think Zoro is by a wide margin stronger. I shouldn't have said wide margin, and they tore me apart for saying wide margin. It was beautiful. I was so happy. This is great. I was like, yes, this is exactly what I want. You guys suck as people. This is great. I love this so much. It's great. Long term, it's toxic because the moment semantics become scripture, well, creativity dies. Fans start policing each other, claiming moral superiority over fictional labels. Zoro is the world's greatest swordsman, not the world's greatest sword user. Ooh, didn't think about that, did you? Didn't think about that, did you? Oh, he's a sword user, but not... Oh, you see that? You see that? It becomes the rallying cry of those mistaking grammar for gospel. It stops being analysis and becomes gatekeeping cosplay. The truth is, in storytelling, intention trumps terminology. Oda doesn't design characters to fit academic boxes. He doesn't do that. He designs them to feel alive. A character's relationship with their weapon, whether it's Law's Kikoku, I think that's the name of Law's blade, or Brook's Soul Solid, it says more about their soul than any label could. When people fight over what to call them, they reduce that complexity to a dictionary argument. The difference, if we're forced to acknowledge it, lies mostly in mindset. A swordsman hones skills for mastery's sake, while a sword user wields it for purpose, but One Piece constantly blurs that line. Law's sword is an extension of his medical genius. Kinemon's swordship intertwines with his samurai honor, and Zoro, despite being the archetypal swordsman, only wins technically by sheer willpower rather than refined art. The categories leak into each other like seawater into a ship hull, so we can use some sea analogies to be fun for you. This semantic war ignores the language itself is a living creature. Words mutate. In everyday speech, swordsman simply means person with a sword. The average viewer isn't dissecting the metaphysics of discipline. They see a blade, they see combat, and their brain says swordsman, right? Trying to police what it's like yelling at the tide to stop moving. Language doesn't bend to obsession, it bends to use. Fandoms argue like this to reveals a strange insecurity. The need to define something so tightly it can't be misunderstood, even if that suffocates its meaning. People want control. They want their own interpretation. But One Piece was never about control. It's about freedom. About men and women carving identity on an endless ocean. If Zoro's dream is about being the world's greatest swordsman, maybe it's not about semantics at all. Maybe it's about meaning something to him, not to us. And here's where the real irony blooms. Oda himself constantly blurs definitions. He has introduced curse swords, soul blades, energy blades, even people whose bodies become blades. If swordsman is supposed to mean someone purely using traditional swordsmanship, then One Piece as a series has already rendered that impossible. The world is too weird, too magical, too Oda. This whole debate, at its heart, is a microcosm of modern fandom. People mistaking categorization for comprehension. We think if we can label something perfectly, we understood it. But sometimes you don't need to define everything and argue about everything. You can argue forever about what feels like a swordsman, about what makes a swordsman. But when Mihawk slices an iceberg or Zoro roars against King, everyone feels the same thing. Awe. Just awe. They are in shock and awe. That's what matters. I think it's very toxic to go so far as to send threats to somebody and do all this linguistic tug of war to do that. I think it's dumb, right? Let swordsmen be sword users. Let sword users be swordsmen. The words aren't sacred. The feeling is, I really don't care about any of this stuff. It seems goofy. It seems ridiculous. But it keeps the fandom alive. It does. But going as far as to send threats to somebody over this is where it gets ridiculous. And the condescension that people speak of when they say this, it agitates me. I was just in the main subject of this video, BDA law. I was just in Brago's server. And by God, they hate me. Oh, it's crazy. They hate me. It's so cute. It's so very, very cute. I might make a direct response just for Brago one of these days if this ever escalates to an insane degree. But I just want to talk about the overwhelming drama in the One Piece community right now over the arguments of swordsmen and person who uses a sword. It seems goofy. It seems very goofy to see this. It is dumb. It's very, very dumb. So, yeah. Just want to add in this little extra bit at the end from this One Piece video that I have a GoFundMe right now. It is to help my family. If you want to support, we have a GoFundMe going on. I put the link in the top comment. Thank you guys so much for checking that out. I'm out. Peace. Bye.